Hello. This is the file that you just downloaded from Social Explorer. And as you'll see when you look at it, we have an extra row. So at some point you're going to have to delete this top one. I left it there for you so that you wouldn't have to memorize all of the field names. So let's just quickly get oriented. First, this is the GeoFIPS. So this is the identifier that you'll use to join to your census file. So your census file, I should say census tract file, will have the same codes. If it doesn't, then the geography is obviously not the correct one. But what this is, as I mentioned in class maybe once, that this is your state code, and then this is your county code for Philadelphia, and then you have a census tract ID number. So that's how these usually work, these GeoFIPS. Now, if you were using census block groups, you'd have an extra digit at the end. So just to get oriented, there's things that we can remove that we don't need. So we definitely need this field. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and delete up to here, which is, it says tribal blocks, I believe. Yeah, so tribal block groups. So we can delete all of these for now. So we're going to be deleting some of these as we go, just to make life easier for us. So here is the land area. You know, this type of number can be used to calculate population density if we didn't already extract it. So the other thing then we want to do is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to calculate the poverty value. So my poverty value is at the end of the file. So what you want to do is look for the beginning of it. And you'll see these like multiple variables. Some of these are what they call margins of error. So they're showing you how much error could be in the actual calculation. I guess it's easier if you click here. All right, so here's the population for whom poverty was determined. All right, so that's the first one. So this essentially is going to end up being your denominator. So we want to keep that. And then what we're going to look for is the one that says the number of people living below poverty. So you've got to kind of look at each of these. This is population for whom poverty status to determine. Income in the past 12 months below the poverty level. So this is going to be your numerator. And then what you can do, basically, these are just your margins of error, and then also it's the number of people who aren't living below poverty, but you can delete all of these. This is why I said to make a backup copy, because there's lots of room for problems. So here we have, again, we can double check population for whom poverty is determined, income in the last 12 months below the poverty level. Okay, so here's the numerator and denominator. So what you can do is you can create a new field here, call it pov percent below, something like that. And then you can just quickly do the math here, 261 divided by the denominator times 100, because we're going to get a percent. And then for those that haven't used Excel, I think you could either double click here, it'll go all the way down, or you could have grabbed it and pulled it down to the bottom. So there looks like there's places where there's no values calculated, and that's okay. Okay, so this is the variable that you just created. So what you might want to do is you can color it so later on that you can, when you're finished organizing. So what we're going to do is we're going to export the file. We're going to keep these three. I recommend that you don't just keep this. You'll end up keeping these three. Just way you could always double check your calculation later. The other thing that we'll do is we'll calculate one of these. We can just do like percent Hispanic or something like that. I just wanted to have you become a little bit familiar with some of these variables. So what we will look for is, let's see what we got here. This is the total population that's Hispanic or Latino, right? So what we can do is we can highlight this for organizational purposes. So what we're going to want to be looking for is some sort of denominator. What would this be divided by? So this is going to have to be divided by the entire population. So that's the Hispanic population. And then what we want is we're going to be looking for the total population. So it's going to be this field here, total pop. So we can just highlight that quick so that we know where it is. So then what you can do is just like we did previously, we'll just call this percent Hispanic. And then we just need to do the math. We're going to do equals. And we're going to find the field that had Hispanics. And we're going to divide this by the total population times 100. So this will give us the percent of that census tract that is Hispanic. And again, we'll can either double click that or pull that all the way down. So these are going to be the two variables that we're going to eventually map. Okay. So I think it's okay. You can just leave all of this. You don't really need to delete it. Just remember that at the end of your file, you have your two new variables. But what you will need to do before we move on is you're going to have to delete this top set of all these rows here, right? So what you're going to want to do is just select it, and then at least in Excel, you're going to hit right mouse click and then delete it, right? Because the software is only going to read that first one, and it would get confused if you had two of them there. So you're going to go ahead and delete that. And the next thing you're going to do is you can do a file, save as, and you're going to go ahead and continue to save it as a CSV, comma, delimited file. And I'll just call this estimates so that I know that these are the ones that I calculated. So then in the next step, what you're going to do, which will be in further on in the tutorial, is you're going to bring this file into QGIS and then eventually join it with your census tract data.